All right, I think we are live. How is everybody doing today? You know the drill. I want to know where you guys are listening from, so drop those locations in the chat. Always interested to see where people are listening from, especially when I do podcasts at different times of the day. But yeah, I'm back. It's been a little bit of time since I was on here live streaming. Sorry, I'm adjusting my chair a little bit. But we are back. I was out of town doing some fishing, enjoying some family time, enjoying the 4th. I hope everybody enjoyed their 4ths for all of my American homies who celebrate it. I'm sorry to all my British homies who don't celebrate it because you guys kind of lost. Oops. I'm just going to go retweet my thing real quick, and then we will get into it and we will get started. All right. Oh, we have so much to cover today, everybody. We have so much to cover. It's going to be a lot. We're going to get into it. We're going to talk about a lot of different things. Yeah, so we're going to it's a lot. We got 9 days of updates. The map has changed entirely. We got a lot to get into. So yeah, that's what we're going to be doing today. Let's see, what do we got going up? Netherlands, Czech Republic, UK, Nottingham, Greece. Awesome, dude. Those are awesome. Rostov, Tanzania. People from all over the world in here. It's very, very cool. Canada, Sweden, Slovakia, Spain. Holy shit. Got everybody from everywhere. Usually it's just a couple of consistent places, but it appears that it is now we're getting more and more people everywhere. I just have to post one more thing, and then we're going to go ahead and get started. Okay. All right, everything's done. I actually lost. Well, I didn't lose my phone. My girlfriend took the car that I was driving and my truck and took my phone. So I'm without a phone right now. So I have to do everything differently. And my chair just fell. All right. Okay. You guys ready? Let's get into it. Albania, Miami, Portugal. Holy cow. All right. Let's go. All right. We got some map updates. Welcome back, everybody. I'm sorry that I was gone for a week. Like I said, I was doing some fishing. I was enjoying some family, shooting off some fireworks, enjoying the 4th. I'm back now. Of course, I had to leave when there was a giant breakthrough in the front line and I couldn't actually do live streams and stuff like that. But I'm back now. Just a reminder, my Patreon series, Demonetized, has a new episode coming out today. So be sure to go over and check that out after this episode of Kalibrated Live. If you want some more content, and make sure you guys follow me on Telegram and Twitter. Both of those links can be found in the description on the YouTube video. If you're watching on my Twitter, you can find those links on my profile. If you guys have any questions, throw them up in the chat while we're going on. Sometimes I look over and I see some. If you guys do super chats or super thanks, I always get to those questions because I just see them. So if you're interested in supporting me that way and asking a question in that manner, I always get to those as well. All right. Without further ado, guys, we got some map updates to cover. And when I say some, I mean a ton. So we're just going to go ahead and hop right in. Let's start with the Vovchansk area. So up in the north, the Ukrainians and Russians are still fighting in the Vovchansk region, the city. The lines have not moved very much. The Russians have pushed a little bit into this aggregate plant and into the citadel down here. But the lines have not moved very much. It now appears that the Russians are pretty cemented in this area. So I don't know if we're planning on seeing a Ukrainian offensive in this region anytime soon to push this back out. They're now dealing with other incursions in other areas of Kharkov and Sumy. We're going to talk about those as well. But this has been going on now for 2 months. The Russians are well established in this area. They know what they're doing. and the Ukrainians are not able to push them out. It doesn't appear that the Ukrainians have the strength. Other things that are happening on the map are not allowing additional reserves and equipment to be brought up here to push the Russians out. However, the Ukrainians are going into their NATO summit peace, whatever nonsense thing here pretty soon. And some of the rumors, some of the talk was that the Ukrainians wanted to undo this before that summit occurred. And we do actually have some offensive operations by the Ukrainians over here near Hilboke and Lipsy down here. The Ukrainians have pushed up just through these fields along this tree line and back into the northern area of Hilboke. I think it's Hilboke. I don't know, though. So just a minor advance here. But still, the Ukrainians are conducting offensive operations and trying to push the Russians back. But all in all, not much change on this entire front. And I don't often change this map for, one street here, two streets there. I think a lot of this area is kind of gray zone. And like in Vovichansk, just for an example, like this area right here, while seems like there's a line along the street, or there's a demarcation line here, all of this is just gray zone, and it goes back and forth. Ukrainians will assault and capture a building, the Russians will take it back, back and forth, back and forth. Most of this is actually destroyed pretty thoroughly now, but I don't do a lot of updates on this northern Vovichansk area unless they're significant enough to be like shown like this. And because it's a Ukrainian advance, I think that it's also important to show it. Even if it's small. All right. Moving down. And remember, guys, these are 9 days worth of map updates. So this is not just a single update that you're seeing. It's not just a, it's multiple days. And I'm going to actually, somebody had asked previously to add up all of the advances when I do these live streams. And I haven't found a way to get it like posted up anywhere, like over in this part of the screen or anything. But in totality, you can see the green on the map. There's quite a bit of green all over the place. The Russians over the past week have advanced 40 square kilometers in total across the entire front line, which is pretty significant in this conflict for a week. That used to be like months and months of Russian progress. So. Yeah, 40 square kilometers is quite a bit, especially when the Ukrainians aren't allowing the Russians to actually advance in any particular area. They're not retreating, they're not pulling back. The Russians are taking all of this at an extreme cost to the Ukrainians. They're defending every inch. Up here in the LPR, very close to the Kharkov region, the Russians have advanced slightly north, slightly south of Berestove. And the reason why I bring up Berestove is because this is now almost cut off by a water feature right here. So there's a reservoir, there's a creek bed. This is in the low ground, and this whole area on this side of this river right here, or reservoir, is likely going to be captured, and it should be the primary focus of the Russian troops in the area, just because this is one of the furthest points along this entire line for Ukrainian logistics, and it should be one of the easier areas to wrap up quickly. But a small advance up into Stelmakivka right here. There were reports that the Russians had entered the very edge of this village and captured some of these houses, but at the end of the day, these smaller advances in this Kharkov LPR region are more just positional updates rather than actually being impactful to the overall conflict. Again, another small advancement by Russian forces in the Luhansk and Donetsk oblasts towards Novelske. Just a small map change. Really not even an advance. Can you please stop? Thank you. Sorry, my dog was scratching. Okay, moving down. Around Terny, this is more of a map update than an actual Ukrainian advance. I had the map marked with the Russians in this blue area there have been geolocations in this area. Again, just positional fighting in this region, but the Ukrainians are present in these forest belts, so the map has been updated. Okay, time to get down to the more impactful updates. So first and foremost, the village of Spirne in the Donetsk People's Republic down here has been likely fully captured. There was a Russian flag planted just somewhere in this building or in this building right here, but just I think it was in this building. So it is likely that Spirne has been completely captured by Russian forces. This is an area that has been the front line since 2022. It has been a gray zone battlefield forever. There's almost nothing left here. And it was a very advantageous position for the Ukrainians to maintain. Now that they've lost it, the Russians will start to be able to get back behind onto this high ground back over here and push the Ukrainians closer and closer back into Seversk. We've seen progress up the rail line towards Vemkivka, and we've seen progress over here towards Ivano-Dorivka as well. So overall, I think that the Seversk salient is starting to get very tight for the Ukrainians. I think that this area is starting to feel a lot of the manpower and artillery issues. They're still doing a very good job of defending Seversk and the Seversk salient, but you know it's just like every other area on the map. It's going to start seeing losses if the manpower and equipment situation doesn't stabilize soon, which I doubt it will, considering the position Ukraine is in. The village of Rozdalivka has been entirely captured by the Russians. Again, just another small advancement, nothing too impactful to the overall conflict, but it does set up the Russians to get into the urban conglomerate, I guess you would call it, a line of villages that leads to Seversk. So Seversk is very important. If Seversk falls, the ability to push into Slavyansk opens up greatly for the Russians. Okay, moving over to Chasiv Yar, you can see that the Russians have now captured all of the territory on the eastern end of the canal up to Kalina. So this is very, very important. The Russians now have a very strong defense line. Remember, I said the Russian goal into the summer should be to capture everything along the canal, even to the north, and I believe that they will begin to push north into Horivka here and Minkivka. But south as well is also important. This hill, the Ukrainians still hold. It's vital to the defense of Stupochki, to the defense of the Niu-York, Konstantinivka, Toretsk conglomerate right here. It's just oh, I'm muted again. Oh, I hate this derailment, boys. I hate this. I hate this so much. I'm so pissed at myself. All right. The PC did its thing again. I don't know what the issue is. I've test run it, tried to get it fixed. Can't figure it out. And then I just talked through a muted mic because I'm actually an idiot. All right, back to it. Sorry for the derailment. This area is of vital importance to the Russians maintaining, the Ukrainians maintaining positions on this hill and across this canal. is very, very important to keeping this entire salient alive and healthy, which it's not already, but it is of vital importance to maintain positions on this hill, and it is costing the Ukrainians greatly. We see constant losses from FPVs and grenade drops on this hill across the canal. So while the Ukrainians are maintaining it and it's important, it is coming at an extreme cost, and logistics are very difficult. Whereas the Russians enjoy logistics out of Ivaniski and out of Klishchivka. You know, it's much easier for the Russians to attack this area than it is for the Ukrainians to defend it, crossing the canal and just being exposed in the fields. Once I don't believe we're going to see a lot of offensive operations into Chasiv Yar unless the overall situation for the AFU deteriorates so greatly that the Russians can basically just cross and walk in. I think that the canal makes a very strong defensive line for the Ukrainians. We could definitely see small crossings over here and down over here where the canal goes underground. However, I don't see the Russians really focused on this area right now, unless, again, the opportunity presents itself. The Niu-York Toretsk salient is going to draw in a lot more Ukrainian reserves and troops to try to hold it. It's in a much worse position. I think the Russians are really going to focus on this area. It was kind of my prediction for the summer offensive. Remember, I said that the Kharkov was just going to be border skirmishes, trying to incursions, trying to get the Ukrainians to respond. The Ukrainians did. And now look at what's happening south of New York and Toretsk. This is the collapse I was talking about in the description of my video, as well as earlier in the video. All right, moving down to said breakthrough. If you guys remember, before I left, we talked about the Russians capturing this big chunk, Sumy, and the water treatment facility. Now the Russians are pushing into Druzhba. Pretty massive advance here. The Ukrainians are not ready for this. They're not prepared. They do not have the reserves in the area. They're getting beat up. Fab 3000s, 1500s, constantly dropping on the city. Any of these large, apartment buildings that the Ukrainians use for defensive positions are just getting leveled by bombs. Any of these small industrial areas also just getting leveled by bombs. And the fighting has already entered into the high-rise area of the city, so out of more of the suburban single family homes and into the larger, much more defensible positions. Once the Russians capture this area, this will be the staging point for future offensive operations deeper into Toretsk, into Pivnichi and Druzhba, as well as over here into Zalizny. Lots of Terrakons too, very, very high territory. The Russians are up against one right here. Again, once this gets captured, this entire area to the south of Sumy and to the north of New York up here, which is still the last remaining area of 10-year fortifications, which I was actually going to take you guys over to Syriac maps. Because he has excellent mapping of the defense lines, so I can actually show you guys. All right, so this is Syriac maps. Go follow Syriac maps too. He does a very good job. And you can see this was the progress into the Sumy region that the Russians conducted. You can see that they captured these defense lines. These defense lines are much deeper than just the blue line, but this was the no man's zone or no man's land in between the blue and the orange during the cold conflict from 2016 until 2022. So not a lot going on in between these lines, but behind the blue line was a lot of Ukrainian defensive fortifications that the Russians are now utilizing for further offensive operations into the urban area. Once this falls, the entire salient is going to get much tighter and much more difficult to defend. These fortifications are holding back what I would consider a large red wave right now of Russians. And if this breaks, the ability for Ukraine to actually defend Niu-York and Toretsk becomes much more difficult. So big advances by the Russians, capturing huge fortifications and moving into the urban area, all in what I would consider a collapse. Less than 2 weeks, we've seen a complete collapse of Ukrainian defensive positions. They're now fighting to stabilize in every direction. And this is the last thing you want when you're dealing with the Kharkov situation, when you're dealing with Seversk becoming more difficult, and when you're dealing with this mess heading towards Pokrovsk. This is just not what you want if you're the Ukrainians. To the south, the Russians have advanced quite significantly up through New York. New York is kind of this weird town. It sort of looks like this. Kind of messed it up a little bit already, but it's all good. New York is kind of like this. So they have entered New York and captured the southern edge of the town, but they have almost completely, if not completely, captured the small town of Yerlivka right here. So another settlement falling to the Russian forces in Ukraine. Yeah, it's just not a. This is horrible. Remember, I said I needed to actually talk about this a little bit more. You guys remember I had talked about how my idea for how they were going to approach this was something along the lines of this, right? Moving up towards the ring road, which they are doing, and then moving down the highway, moving into Stopochki, and cutting off Konstantinivka and isolating this urban area right here. I said that what Russia needs to do is continue attacking on this front, force Ukrainians into the pocket, force Ukrainians to be defending and putting out fires here. And then once the flanks get weakened, you expose the flanks and you attack with a lot more vigor, right? You bait them in, you hold them here, you wear them down with attrition as they're trying to undo this mess. The loss of these fortifications is nothing short of a mess. You can't describe it in any other way. And once that happens, once the Ukrainians are in and they're getting worn, then you attack with more intensity on the flanks, forcing either these troops to become encircled, retreat, or be pulled out to bolster the flanks. If they get pulled out to bolster the flanks, you then attack in the middle, stretch and pull, stretch and pull, stretch and pull. Soon the Ukrainians are caught in a salient. They have nowhere to go, and that's it, right? So that's how I thought it was going to move forward. The only thing I had said was the way that the Russians are going to get through this area is with a tunnel operation. And it appears that the Russians have done another tunneling operation like they did in Avdiivka. It seems successful, moving through some sort of sewer or drainage pipes and advancing into the city. So again, another clandestine, I would almost consider it, operation in terms of what we've seen throughout this war. And it's been very successful in 2 instances, has basically compromised 2 fortress cities just by tunneling. So it's a very, very successful tactic for the Russians in this conflict specifically. Okay, moving down to the Avdiivka front. I almost don't even know if we can call it the Avdiivka salient anymore because it is wrong tool. It is 17 miles now, 15 miles now behind the front lines. So, 25, 30 kilometers behind the front. I made a post. You guys can go check it out on my Twitter. It just shows the deep state maps from February 6th to July 6th. And you can just see how much the Russians have captured. It was a shadow of itself. And now the Russians are closer to Mihrad than they are to Avdiivka. Yep, 11.5 miles there. So this is no longer the Avdiivka front. It is now the Pokrovsk front. And that's what I will be calling it from now on. On the Pokrovsk front, the Russians have advanced out of let me retry this one. Novo-Alexandrivka to Vozdizvinka. My goodness. They have also advanced out of Sochil into Vashkod and towards Toretsk up here. So lots of Russian movement. This is significant. If you guys remember, the Ukrainian defense lines run something like this. It's very weird. And the way the map looks makes the defense lines look completely useless, but they are not, or they were not before the Russians captured Orchitny. So I'm just going to make these colored so you can see them. Yeah, so you can see here that these are the defense lines. They sort of follow these urban settlements down. And with the loss of Orchitny, that was the major screw up by the Ukrainians. The Russians made it into the city. Once they were in the city, they were already behind these defense lines. All they have to do is work down the defense lines and unravel them. That is what's happening. The Ukrainians have likely completely retreated from this peninsula. We've seen videos of the Russians clearing these buildings using anti-tank mines, like literally throwing anti-tank mines into Ukrainian positions and destroying the buildings, probably destroying their eardrums at the same time. That video will be in the demonetized series. I will cover it. I remember I just bookmarked it. So, okay. Up here, the Russians have completely captured the town of Yasnondobrivka. Again, I don't really know how much of a town it is. It looks like it's sort of like a farmhouse, some entrenchments, and whatever this these lake houses are. Nothing overly significant, but again, the Russians are just pushing out this peninsula. All of these areas right here will be captured rather quickly now that the Ukrainian defense lines up here are falling. You can see that with this movement down from Vashkod and down from Sochil through these open fields, it has really begun to expose Novoselivka and Novoselivka Pershe down here. So lots of Russian movement. The Ukrainians aren't really able to respond to any of them appropriately, and the situation is just getting worse and worse and worse for the Ukrainians. We have a question. Brother, the more I follow everything, the more I conclude the U.S. knows Russia won. They told Russia, if you take more land, we will send more weapons. I think that the U.S. is at the point where they are only supporting this because the current ruling political class, the current administration in the United States and the military-industrial complex are still profiting and benefiting from the continuation of the war. I think overall, the political class of the United States is no longer benefiting from Ukraine. Just the Biden administration and the military-industrial complex. There's probably some that are still benefiting, but the mood has very much soured on this Ukraine project. It's souring in Ukraine very quick, in Europe, sorry. Something I'm going to talk about was the recent meeting between Victor Orban and Zelensky, and then the meeting between Victor Orban and Putin, which is a very big deal. It marks a division in the European body politic when it comes to the Ukraine project. And it's just going to spread. I talked about how with the upcoming elections, we saw a massive swing right. We are going to continue to see these swings right as long as the political situation in Europe does not improve. And with these swings to popularist, nationalist governments, you're going to see a steep decline in Western support to Ukraine, particularly European support, because anytime you're voting in a popularist or a nationalist right wing, the reason you're voting them in is because everything is wrong in your opinion, and you want them to make things better, usually rather forcefully, but that's what's required sometimes, right, to turn things around, because what Europe is currently doing is just running them into the dirt. It's not going to improve the situation. So Europe I mean, we've seen Le Pen in France already talking about how the support is going to become less and less for Ukraine, and France is one of the major backers. Right, Macron is the Napoleon for Ukraine, apparently. So there are massive swells in Europe. I've said for a long time that Ukraine is smoldering from within. The people don't want to fight. Even the people that are fighting don't want to fight anymore. It used to be there was a lot of propaganda at the beginning of the war. The Ukrainians were very on board. They were willing to go fight. The lies were keeping everything under wraps about the reality of the situation. Now the reality's out, but the government has so much control that nobody can really do anything. Ukraine is smoldering. At a certain point, that will catch fire, and Ukraine will burn. But Europe is also smoldering right now. It's just something that's not being talked about, is how the continuation of the current, the you know the status quo cannot continue for Europe economically, demographically. Things are not going well for Europe, and it's just going to continue to get worse and worse. And you're just going to continue to see this degrade unless these far right, these right governments get brought in and are going to be more populist and nationalistic, and focus on the countries themselves and the populace themselves. Will that happen? We'll see. But yeah, I don't think that I think that you're right that the U.S. is definitely pulling back from Ukraine. Biden, I think, is going to be blamed for it entirely after they get rid of him. There's no way he makes it to the election. He's on there on Twitter saying, I'm going to beat Trump again, this, that, and the other. I'm running. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. But no, I've said for a long time that he was going to get removed. I've been saying it since January, February. There's no way. I've dealt with grandparents that have dementia, right? I've dealt with in-laws that have dementia specifically and stuff like that. And Biden he's a walking case study for what mental decline looks like, especially over these last 6 months. He's not going to be your president, guys, if you're in America. And if he is, there is something fundamentally wrong with our system. And I'll be happy that he's president, because I just want to watch it burn. There is no way that human being, even if, 20 years ago, sure, he could be president, whatever. He's just not cognitively available anymore. A lot of people in his camp are saying he's basically, you can't even talk to him unless it's between 12 p.m. and 4 p.m. Those are like his only good hours. So yeah, it's just very sad. He's kind of a piece of shit, but it's still sad that an old man is being forced into that position when cognitively, he can't even stand trial for the crimes that he's committed, let alone run a country and work in foreign policy and all of that. So yeah, lots of advances on this front. Things are deteriorating very, very quickly for Ukraine here. And you can see it's just a broad set of advances. It's not a single direction. It's not a single focus like we've seen with the Russians frequently. It was Soledar and Bakhmut. It was Lysychansk and Severodonetsk. It was Mariupol. But now it's everywhere. They're just pushing everywhere. I do believe very much so that the force disposition in this conflict, in terms of Ukraine having more manpower or Russia having more manpower, has reached parity, or the Russians are now in a more advantageous position than the Ukrainians. We're just seeing too many Russian advances all over the place. Ukraine has no ability to slow it down and stop it. Ukraine has no ability to stop glide bombs, missile strikes, drones. I'm going to talk about some events that have happened and how just the overall situation for Ukraine is deteriorating. I don't know. I'm trying to impress it upon you guys. I know you listen to me often, so you've heard it for a long time. But I have often I often give the prediction that the conflict will end in around 2026. Everything will wrap up, and I still think that that's true, because even after the fighting's done, there's still a lot of diplomatic work that needs to be done. It takes a long time for these things to come to fruition. If there's any more, voting in annexed regions, anything like that, it's it's important, right? But the way that the battlefield is looking now, and the way that the Russians are snowballing in multiple different areas, the way that the Ukrainian regime is talking about inviting Russia to the next peace summit when they haven't done that a single time, when Victor Orban from Hungary, who is now that, if you guys don't know how the EU works, different countries become the acting like president of the EU Council. Over time, they rotate through. Hungary is now up, and with their time as president, or is it president? Is that what they call it? I'm actually not sure. Victor Orban is acting. Is it acting president of the European Commission or Council? I'm trying to remember. Sorry, too much information to keep straight. Anyway, he is speaking on behalf of the EU. Went to Kiev, talked to Zelensky about peace negotiations and a peace process. Went to Moscow, talked about that, and I'll just talk about that right now because the reaction was very, 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 very interesting. So, Zelensky isn't really in a position to change his narrative at all. He can't begin to say, yes, we need to negotiate, we need to do this, that, and the other. He can't do that. So Viktor Orban's meeting with Zelensky in Kiev was rather mute. It didn't amount to anything. And at the end of it, the Kiev regime came out and made a statement basically saying that what Viktor Orban is proposing is too good for the Russians. It's divorced from reality, because what is good for the Russians is that this war continues and that the Ukrainian regime collapses. That would be what's best for Russia, because they don't want to have to deal with the same people in office. They want to put their own people in. That's the whole goal of this now. This is not there is no peace talks. There's nothing like that. Regime change in Moscow, regime change in Kiev. That's the only way this happens. Again, I think it's going to happen in Kiev. And this doesn't mean that the Russians are necessarily going to get a puppet in. The West could replace Zelensky and his administration and put in a new president who's going to negotiate, do what they're told, basically. I don't know. I can't predict the future. But unless something dramatically changes and the West just rolls over and loosens up sanctions on Moscow, talks to Ukraine about negotiating, they negotiate, and we know what the minimum is, right? We know what the minimum is for the Russians. It's the 4 oblasts. So the LPR, the DPR, Zaporozhye, and Kherson. That includes Kherson City. That includes Zaporozhye City. And that includes Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, and this entire area. Not tenable for the Ukrainians, guys. They can't do that. The Ukrainian leadership cannot do that, especially after basically dooming the country to perpetual rumpness. I don't even know how to explain it. Ukraine will never be Ukraine again, and that's super unfortunate. But Ukraine can decide if it wants to maintain its territorial integrity and government as it currently stands, or if they're going to keep fighting until the Russians force that change. If the Russians have to force that change, this map is going to look much worse than that option for the Ukrainians. But if the Ukrainians back out, I don't think the regime survives anyway. There will probably be some sort of popular overthrow, and then we're going to be in a different situation with different calculus. So the whole thing is very wild. I did want to read one of my articles that I have today is actually about this topic. So I'm going to just read a little bit from the BBC here. Hungary's I hate how they titled it. They write these article headlines. Hungary's Russia-friendly PM meets Putin in Moscow. Instead of just saying Hungary's Viktor Orban, they have to do Russia-friendly. They gotta get that little slight in there a little bit. Really make it known that he's sort of like the puppet. He's Putin's man in Europe, even though he's not. He's Hungary's man, right? That's the thing is anytime a European leader has gone against the narrative and basically done something trying to better their populace's condition, it just gets worse, right? So is Victor Orban a bad guy? Is he? Is he? I would say I would put him in a different category than Erdogan, right? Because Erdogan, he plays both sides, but that's what the Turks have always kind of done. They do this frequently. I don't see Viktor Orban playing both sides like Erdogan from Turkey does, right? Erdogan from Turkey. He seems more in favor of just keeping Hungary where it is. And the way the Europeans talk about Hungary, you would think it was the size of Texas or something. It's crazy. The amount of power and pull and screen time, I guess you would call it, that Viktor Orban gets over the other European leaders, even like Macron and these other people. It's pretty telling of how strong of a politician he is. He went to Zelensky first, which I think is very appropriate, being from the EU and the way that the EU has been supporting Ukraine. He went in and talked to both of them, I suspect, in almost the exact same manner, although I don't think Viktor Orban really likes Zelensky all that much, and I don't think Zelensky likes Viktor Orban. I think Putin and Viktor Orban have a much more friendly business relationship than Zelensky and Orban. But went and said basically the same thing at both tables. One side vehemently denied wanting to do it, having any part of it, said it would never work. And the Russians came forward and they offered something, right? Anything. They said that we will stand by some of the agreements of the Istanbul negotiations, which does not mean, guys, that they're going to lose Zaporozhye and Kherson, that stuff. That's nonsense. That's not what that means. It means that the minimum requirements for Russia to come to the negotiating table that were present in the Istanbul negotiations will be present in these future negotiations. And we all know what that means. NATO neutrality, denazification, whatever that entails. That one is kind of the least important to me in terms of the overall outcome of this thing. Agreement to never develop nuclear weapons or weapons of mass destruction, and respect of Russian culture and history, right? So language, the Russian people in the country, the churches, the monuments, everything. That's what the Russians require to come to the table. Now, the territorial concessions, that stuff, that's different from the Istanbul. Don't get that confused. It's not the same deal. They're not saying, hey, let's just go back to March 2022. Nope, that's not what they're saying at all. What they're saying is, to get us to the table, we need sanctions relief, we need NATO neutrality, we need no weapons of mass destruction in Ukraine, and we need demilitarization. Not get rid of your entire military, but we need you to not be building up your military in a way that looks provocative towards Russia. Sort of like Germany after World War I, same sort of thing in the Treaty of Versailles. Okay. Actually, I was going to just read this a little bit so you got their take on it. Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban has met Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow in a visit that has been heavily criticized by EU leaders and Ukraine's government. Yeah, because they don't care about actually ending the war. They don't want peace. They don't want anything. And Viktor Orban is a pain in their side because he is a politician. He is a professional politician. This guy right here kind of kicks the ass of people like Rishi Sunak, Macron. Those people, they're very soft compared to how he handles himself in politics, in my personal opinion. Again, my bias. But I tend to think that Xi, Putin, Viktor Orban, Modi, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, is it Lula? I think it's Lula. I know it starts with an L in Brazil. I think these are politicians. These are high level politicians compared to Biden, Jake Sullivan. Who else? Macron, I already said. Boris Johnson. They're kind of they don't hold themselves as well in politics as Victor Orban does, as Putin does. You can tell in the negotiations. You can tell in how they react to specific things that they're just not up to the task. And this is one of the biggest failures I think I've seen in the West, is that the fact that our foreign policy and our diplomacy is just piss poor. It's horrible. We bully and we threaten, and we don't even do that right. We don't do it good. We don't get the job done. Like I always say this: if we were winning everywhere around the world and maintaining our hegemony and kicking ass, and yeah, maybe it wasn't morally right or whatever. I get so tired of that shit because nobody has any moral high ground in the world. Nobody does. The US doesn't have it over anybody. China doesn't have it. Everybody does bad things. And this moral superiority position doesn't work for me in any of my analysis. I just look at who's doing the best for their country, who's presenting themselves properly, and who's getting things done. And it's always these guys. It's never Biden. Ever. In 4 years, it has never one time been Biden. Afghanistan, Ukraine, Israel, everything. The economy. He just doesn't get anything done. All right, I'll keep reading though. Hungary has just taken over the presidency of the Council of the European Union. Yeah, presidency of the Council of the European Union. Got it. I was right. But EU leaders have stressed that Mr. Orban is not acting on behalf of the bloc. Oh, yeah. It's called having free agency and doing what's best for your sovereign nation as its elected president. This is what happens when you have unelected, basically Eurocrats in position. It's this idea that you're either with us or you're against us, not either you're with the bloc or you're against us, or maybe you just don't want to do this because it's not going to be what's right for Hungary, right? It's never that. It's black and white, and it's how you isolate and probably oust eventually. I mean, he's in a very difficult position. I think now with the way the war is going and the side that he's kind of positioned himself on, he might come out much better. I heard a comment about him, about Victor Orban, basically from European politicians saying he's always 5 years ahead of everybody else. He's thinking 5 years further in the future than people in Britain, people in Berlin, people in France. Oh, by the way, Olaf. I didn't say Olaf. I never even think of him. He's such a neutered nobody. Don't care about him. But again, another European politician not doing what they need to do for their countries where they were elected. I'm reading this incredibly slow, one sentence every 4 minutes, and it seems like. After the meeting, which lasted several hours, Hungary's PM said Russia and Ukraine were still far apart in their views on achieving peace, because it's never going to happen. Many steps are needed to end the war, but we took the first steps to restore dialogue, he said. The biggest issue here is that Europe cannot allow Viktor Orban to be the individual who negotiates this peace settlement. They can't allow it. They can't. The current European leadership cannot allow this to happen. That would be a death sentence, basically, for the current narrative, the current direction, and that it's like an ideology, guys. This is how you have to think about this. It's like any religion. People get fanatic about it, and there is no alternative. There is no other direction. There is no backtrack. It's only forward. And if you're not with us, you're against us. If you're not right, you're wrong. Right? It's a ridiculous position, but that's what Viktor Orban represents right now in Europe. It's what Le Pen is going to represent soon as well. All right. If you guys have some questions, go ahead and get some questions in. I'm done with the map, so I just have some more articles to talk about. This one's from CNN. Marine Le Pen promises French far right will rein in aid to Ukraine. Again, they have to make sure they add far right. So everybody's very, very scared, very, very scared of the Nazis, I guess, or whatever. Also, this is barely even right by like U.S. standards or anything like that. So the French far right will rein in aid to Ukraine. Slam soccer star Mbappe. I don't even know what that's about. But the key point here is that the government that's coming into power, Marine Le Pen's government in France, is already heading in the direction of appeasing the population, right? The French don't want to give more weapons and money to Ukraine. They don't. There's issues in France that need to be solved. Economic issues, energy issues. There's things that need to be solved. France lost Niger. They lost its uranium supply. These things are going to start having impacts. And when I say these far right governments are going to come into power, that's exactly why, is because the current administrations, the current governments, the current leadership are just losing, and they just keep losing and losing and losing. All right. That was my last article. So yeah, if you guys want to go ahead and get some questions in, we can go ahead and get some questions in. I'm going to go over and talk about the recent strikes that we've seen from the Russians in Ukraine. Particularly, I wanted to talk about the recent strike at the Mihrad airport in the Poltava region. It is the primary airport for Su-24s, MiG-29s, and some Su-25s. But this is a very large airport, one of the ones that could potentially have been used for F-16s. However, it is far too close to the front line to actually position F-16s here. It is in ballistic missile range. And we have seen an absolute genocide of airframes. We've seen multiple MiG-29s, an Su-25, and several, maybe not several, at least one Mi-24 helicopter have been destroyed at the airfield. We have also seen 2 S-300 batteries destroyed around the airfield. So in terms of Russian ISR, 100 kilometers back, the Ukrainians seem completely unable to deal with Russian surveillance drones. Yeah, about 100 kilometers. Over this airport, they just sit right here and just call in Russian missile strikes on the airport and on the area around. The Ukrainians attempted to bring in air defense to stop that. Didn't work. This airport is basically unusable right now for the Ukrainians, but they don't have an option to use another airport in this region. So, in terms of supporting Ukrainian offensive operations with air support over here, it becomes next to impossible if this airfield is being hit anytime planes get rotated up in. And this is a problem that Ukraine is going to experience with F-16s. And it's why I'm very, very suspicious that F-16s will ever be actually given to Ukraine. With the way everybody's talking and the vulnerability of Ukrainian bases, I just really don't see how F-16s exist in a country, and they're not flying out of Europe. They're not going to. So they say F-16s are going to arrive in 2 weeks. Hey, how many are going to arrive and where are they going to be positioned? It's going to be very interesting to see how that happens. They've been also saying that F-16s were going to arrive at the end of May, at the end of June, and now it's July. So I said this the whole time. Don't expect F-16s, if they ever show up, to show up until September. And I don't know if they're even going to arrive in country because the situation on the front line is going to be so much worse by that time. If you guys remember, in February, as I had just talked about it, we were watching the Battle of Avdiivka, right? That was February. That was not long ago. And now Avdiivka is back here. We're looking at the Battle of Niu-York and Toretsk, Chasiv Yar, potentially Seversk soon, incursions into Kharkov region. incursions into the Sumy region here. Potentially, again, I'm very, very cautious about these cross-border raids. I think a lot of them are just that, just raids. So I don't think that there's a lot of need to put a lot of emphasis on these until we actually see some larger offensive actions. There's just not enough Russian troop concentration in the north to really make anything big happen. But again, just pulling and stretching the Ukrainian forces. Let's see if we have any questions. Do you think the debate with Trump was good for Biden and he will win the election? No. I think the debate was horrible for Biden. I think that they almost did it on purpose because they don't want him in office and they want to replace him with whoever they're going to replace him with. I said Michelle Obama. I was just kind of joking about that. I don't think Michelle Obama actually wants to be president. I think she's said it multiple times that she doesn't want to do that. I just thought it would be funny if that prediction came true. But, you know, whoever they put into position, once they remove Biden, they already have the delegates. I think they did this on purpose. They waited. He got the delegates. They put him up in front of everybody. They show everybody that he's completely incapable of cognitively supporting the presidency. And they're going to remove him and put whoever they want in without requiring any voting for that person to become president. So we're going to have an unelected president basically become president, but he's going to be elected because everybody chose him in the primary or in the general election. That doesn't sound very American to me, and it's very worrisome. I don't know if he's actually going to win. I'm just saying if he wins, that's because I don't think the Democrats are really wanting to lose the election to the Republicans. I think that the Russians will dial the accuracy with their Fab 3000s, but you still have critics saying that they've been ineffective up till now. What's your opinion? Bro, I've watched whole apartment buildings that would require 10 to 15 Fab 500s to, you know, reduce it to nothing, get absolutely obliterated with this Fab 3000. No, the reason why the Russians are using them is because they have a purpose. Same with like OFAB 1500s. All of these weapons have a specific use. If the Russians wanted to drop Fab 9000s, they could, right? But what is the actual purpose? What is the benefit of that? These Fab 3000s are just huge explosions that they can just lob, right? They just toss them. So they're not putting aircraft at risk. They completely annihilate any Ukrainian position they land even near to. The CEP on these weapons is massive. So, you know, if you even miss by 20 meters or something, the building is, and everybody inside is still going to be completely obliterated. If you look at the blast wave of these weapons, they liquefy organs. So I don't know. I think that these weapons have been very, very impactful. I think the Ukrainians are complaining about them for a reason. And the accuracy has already improved on these weapons much more than we saw with the initial strikes. Potentially part of the problem is not so much the accuracy with the weapon, but the pilots not having experience using them. Now that the pilots have more experience, you're going to see the weapon accuracy get greater and greater. We see the same thing with Fabs, like 500s. We now watch 4 Fabs hit a tree line, like perfectly spaced apart so that the CEP of each one meets like a Venn diagram. And the weapon system has just become more and more impactful and powerful. It also probably has something to do with Ukrainian air defense being depleted and reduced almost entirely. The Russians now can fly closer, higher, and drop the bombs more accurately. So the glide kits have to do less work to actually improve the accuracy. What do you think Biden's golf handicap is? Bro, I would be impressed if that dude could get out there and do an 18-hole game. That's like 4 to 6 hours outside in the sun. There's no way. That dude needs a nap. If you split up his golf game into 3 holes over, 6 days, it's definitely not an 8. I can tell you that. I can tell you it's not an 8. All right, let's see. Hello. Do you think that Russia and China will turn on each other after the U.S. lost its hegemony? Very potentially. I mean, hegemony is the goal, right? You always want to be the biggest and the best. I think that it's very possible that U.S. Or Russia-Sino relations deteriorate if the U.S. loses a lot of its strategic pull in all of these regions, and then they begin fighting for their own strategic interests, right? Because Russia and China have different strategic interests. I do think that this is also decades down the road, if it happens at all. So, good question, though. Why is Ugladar not receiving Fab 3000s? I don't know. They might be, and we're just not seeing videos. I honestly don't know. I don't know if there's anything left there to even bomb like that. I don't know. Maybe it's availability. Niu-York, Toretsk, and Kharkov are the more important areas right now. Whereas there's not a lot of fighting going on at Ugladar, and there's not a lot of valuable reserves in that area to actually be eliminating with these large bombs. I mean, you could just plow it, but really, if you look at the map, I'll show you guys. Ugladar is very difficult to approach from this way at all. They've tried it, doesn't work. Flat open fields. There's a reason why the Ukrainians are enjoying holding this position. Same with the mine here. The best way to do it is to push Konstantinivka and then push down the road. So don't bomb it out. Just cut off supply and starve it and then capture it. That's what the Russians should do. That's what they're probably going to do. Thank you for those questions, guys. Appreciate it. How much do you think the North Russian incursion helped the advance in the East? Significantly. I think it was basically the primary catalyst. This whole incursion right here was the primary catalyst for this collapse, which this is so significant, guys. This is important, but this is just going to be the constant progress towards Pokrovsk. It might break through eventually, but there is no more significant defensive fortifications out here. The Russians are pushing as fast as they want to here without, taking extremely high casualties. That's their goal. Maintain the current casualty rate and push towards Pokrovsk. This is significantly bad. This is a very, 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 very bad thing for Ukraine that was not supposed to happen, just like it was not supposed to happen in Avdiivka. And we could see another route, particularly in areas like this, where the Ukrainians are now looking like they're going to be potentially cut off. This is the newest update today, just this little progress into this area. If the Russians end up pushing down into Zalizny right here and capture this Terekon, this entire area is going to be completely untenable for the Ukrainians, and they're going to have to retreat. And remember, these are the fortifications. These are the strong defensive points where Ukraine enjoys a defensive advantage. That'll be gone. So Niu-York and Toretsk is almost probably entirely because of the Kharkov operation. I reported multiple times in May and June that the Ukrainians were pulling units from this area, brigades, and moving them up to Kharkov. And it's why I put out a tweet in May that said, I don't think Kharkov is going to be the operation because this area is now looking like a skeleton crew. So another question. If you are India, are you more worried about your Northwest Kashmir or Northwest China? Not China. No, that all the China stuff seems kind of like manufactured over small territorial disputes. Kashmir is a much, much bigger issue for India. What is Modi's concern about before going to Moscow? His concern is trade relations. India is making so much money right now. They are killing it. The government is killing it. They have positioned themselves perfectly to be middlemen between Russia and the West to overcome sanctions. Both sides need it. Both sides are doing it. So his primary concern going to Moscow is economics, trade relations. On the back end of that, yeah, I don't think that China and India are huge trading partners. So there's not really any risk of an actual war there. That's a very ridiculous sentiment. Also, China doesn't want to fight India, and India does not want to fight China. That would be just horrible. So Yeah, definitely Kashmir is a much larger concern than what's going on with China. They do beat each other with sticks sometimes and like maces and stuff, though, which is very, very cool that they have an agreement where they don't use guns and then they just beat the shit out of each other. It's stupid, but whatever. LOL, that would explain the 6, no, 8 handicap. He didn't know how to count them. Yeah, exactly. That's funny. Scott, come visit Albania Alps. Your stay here is free from us. That's awesome. I would love to go to Eastern Europe. Some of the architecture out there is awesome. I like architecture, so um, especially like older architecture. And I would love to go and tour some of Eastern Europe and really see some of that old architecture, the churches and the stuff like that. Let's see. You think the deindustrialization of the EU is intentional by the US as the right hand of Satan? Well, I don't think they're the right hand of Satan. I think they're just very greedy and stupid. But I do. I think that there was part of that. I think particularly Germany. There was an aspect of that where they thought, well, we can just fill this niche. However, they're not going to be able to, and it's just really going to turn out poorly for both sides. They're going to be reliant on each other, which is good for the U.S., but Germany is not going to benefit from that relationship, and the U.S. in the long term will not benefit from that short-term gain of having Germany become reliant on them. It's good. It's good. Germany was already the U.S.'s vassal. It was better that they had cheap energy to produce all of the stuff that they needed to produce to stay strong so that the U.S. could utilize them. Now they have a weak vassal, and that's okay if you're trying to control them, but Germany doesn't really need to be controlled. It's already controlled, right? It does. It's already the politics are already established there to be pro-Western to the end of time, as we saw with Nord Stream. So, yeah, I don't know. Doesn't really. I don't think it's really going to work out for the U.S. Do it, Scott. What if don't do it, Scott? What if it's a CIA honeypot, dude? The CIA knows where I live. They don't need to honeypot me to far away places for that. They can honeypot me right here, and they probably already are. Honestly, I'm probably already being honeypotted. From where do you get your updates? I get my updates from about 1,000 different telegrams. I have some sources that I know personally, so I have my sources, and then yeah, mostly just that. Will you go to Russia? I would love to go to Russia. I would. I've been before when I was very, very young. I haven't been recently. I would love to go back. No allegiance to the country per se, but I think that at least they hold some more conservative values that I think are better for society in general. And I think that that place is very beautiful. I think that it's a huge country and it's just like the United States. No one part is the same. The East is different from the West. Cities are different from, the middle of nowhere. And I like the middle of nowhere. That's where I was for a week. So that's what I was enjoying. And I don't know. I would definitely go and visit Russia. Would I do it right now? Probably not when I'm actually commenting, because I may have definitely said stuff that the Russians may deem not appropriate. And with their censorship and the way that they do things over there, it might be risky for a U.S. citizen to go do that. So I'm very careful, but I would love to. It's FBI. CIA can't operate on U.S. soil. Dude. Can they not? Are you sure about that? I mean, legally, but when has the CIA ever gave a rat's ass about legality? I mean, that's some copium right there, my guy. The CIA definitely operates on U.S. soil, for sure. By law, they can't. Yes, by law, because the CIA is filled with lawyers. Yeah, CIA makes shadow companies to do corporations, shell companies, they mercenaries, they hire whoever. Yeah, it's probably not, you know, the head of the CIA ordering this stuff, but the CIA is definitely running operations on US soil. There's no way they're not. It doesn't make sense for them to not either, honestly. If you guys have some more questions, go ahead and get them in, get them in, get them in. Have I ever tried crack? No. I don't even know where to buy crack. I don't know where to buy heroin. I mean, I probably could find it, but crack, heroin, meth, even cocaine would be hard for me to find. I'm more of a partier, guys. I'm not a addict. So, have you heard of Project 2025? I have not. I will look it up though. I mean, maybe I have, but I can't think of what that is right now. Thank you. Thank you, guys. I think I'm going to actually wrap it up there. We've been talking for an hour and 11 minutes, so we are good to clean it up. I will go record that video. I'm going to go eat lunch, and then I'll probably record the video for demonetized for the Patreon. So make sure you guys go and just follow me there for free. The new free episode will be published there, and then the new exclusive episode will also be published there today. So go check that out, guys. Please like and subscribe if you have not. That helps me out the most. Share this with your friends who are also interested in geopolitics if they like listening to a autistic retard ramble. That's what I'm here for. I'm glad to be back. I will be doing another episode tomorrow, probably with some friends. And yeah, be on the lookout for all my content, guys. Go follow me on Telegram and Twitter, and then you'll see all my updates there. Please be safe this weekend. If you have extra fireworks, please enjoy them responsibly. If you guys are drinking, please drink responsibly. Get extra responsible this weekend for me. If you're doing drugs, don't freak out. It's just drugs. It ends eventually. If you are doing nothing and being straight edge and cool, enjoy your straight edge cool weekend. Be safe, everybody. Don't do anything I wouldn't do, and don't do the things I do.